This video is brought to you by Skillshare. The first 1,000 subscribers to click the link in the description will get a free trial on their premium membership. Raising capital sucks. I hate it. It's one of the worst parts of being a CEO. The dynamic is pretty much, hey, stranger, let me tell you about this company I'm building where I've bet my life, my money, where I've sacrificed time with my family, and maybe see if you like it, and maybe give me money for it. Getting rejected is like dating or failing to date in high school. And there's no way around it. And if you want to scale a tech startup, like real scale, real scale, there's no way around it. We've made dozens of videos on what slides are needed, how to pitch investors, how to meet investors. And a couple of weeks ago, I sat down with an actual investor who opened up about the typical deal breakers that make these deals fall apart. And many of us have no idea, which explains more than one rejection I experienced back in the day. So this insider is Paul Silva, who is the managing partner of River Valley Investors. His firm looks at company perspectives with this curious investment thesis, which we'll talk about soon. Paul is also part of our expert network, so if you can book him through our platform or if you want office hours with him. So the first concept that we have to understand here is the difference in deal styles for West Coast and East Coast investors.
Two things that all entrepreneurs want to keep in mind when you're looking for investor fit, which comes to this coast thing. I think the coast thing is a symptom, not a cause. When you understand the cause, you'll be in much better shape. And that is that smart investors invest in things that they understand, which generally means a sector that they were in before. And that creates some path dependencies, right? So the places I know the best are New England and Silicon Valley, much less so. But in New England, we haven't had nearly as many consumer runaway successes as Silicon Valley, which means we don't have a bunch of millionaires and billionaires that came out of those gigantic exits who would then go on to become the angels and VCs that would fund the next generations of entrepreneurs. What we have is a bunch of very, very successful CEOs of life science companies and B2B enterprise software companies. So we're really good. We've got lots of angels and VCs that understand that, and they will fund those kinds of deals. But if you're literally Mark Zuckerberg, you leave Boston, where you started your company, technically Cambridge, and go to Silicon Valley because they get consumer there. There's lots of successful consumer companies that have come out of there. So there's lots of investors that understand consumer. So as an entrepreneur, you want to think about what sector am I in, because I need to talk to investors that get my sector. And that means, as a general rule, investors, like everything else in life, we tend to agglomerate. So where is there a cluster of investors that get your sector? And you want to be looking for that. And then the other thing you got to watch out for, another thing that I know you've talked eloquently about on your channel, is understanding scale, right? So if you're a venture capital fund whose plan is to breed unicorns, companies that'll exit for north of $1 billion, that necessitates a very specific strategy that is radically different than an investor whose strategy is to get what's called an early exit. An early exit is selling the company for tens of millions of dollars. A unicorn is literally 100 times more than that, right? So you do things differently. If you are going to be breeding unicorns, that means you're not super sensitive about the valuation of the companies at the beginning. Sure, you're a $10 million pre-money valuation, even though you don't have any revenue and you're basically a really nice PowerPoint. Sure. If I think I can sell you for $1 billion, I kind of don't care. I'm grossly overgeneralizing, but it's a good feel. It also means, because I've got these gigantic successes in my portfolio, I got these buckets of cash, and I can afford to pay out some crazy, like, hey, you're some smart people at Stanford. But if you're a New England, I'll stereotype here, a New England angel group that wants to sell a company for $20 million, then there's probably only 1 or 2 rounds of funding. So getting the terms conservative and right at the beginning really, really matters. You cannot screw that up. Off by a factor 2 will totally ruin your return on investment. And so that changes your strategy. So once you understand those two things, then you start to see why Silicon Valley has this reputation, because it has a disproportionate share of consumer-oriented, hyper-growth funds.
A common misconception I've come across is traction. In our own experience, we've tried to raise money 3 times. First one with the product in beta, pre-revenue. That didn't work out. Then after launching the product with a few hundreds of dollars in monthly revenue, which also didn't work. And we met with a lot of investors, hundreds. And finally, we only managed to raise money, our seed round, after we had around $6,000 in monthly revenue. There's, however, this notion that raising money on the West Coast is easier or faster, and that you don't need that much traction. But here's Paul's take on it.
It's really different than it was 15 years ago. When I first started an angel, or 20 years ago when I started my first company, it was all gut instinct. It was all if you saw the movie Moneyball, it was all the guys analyzing the baseball player based on how pretty his girlfriend was. Like, what? How is this a smart metric? But all they had were their guts. Now they got numbers. And so likewise, even in Silicon Valley, they'll invest in a pure play company, but they want to see numbers. Show me your month over month user growth rate. If it isn't 40% or week over week, if it's not 40%, I forget the number, then like you're dead to me. I want to see crazy hockey stick. And New England cares about traction too, but our traction tends to be different. It's like, well, show me that you got a customer to give you money. Show me that you got growth in revenue, because we tend to be more conservative, coming in a different way. So therefore, we're looking for revenue as opposed to user growth. But that's what dictates the strategy.
Now, here's one of those deal breakers. New England investors absolutely despise convertible notes and safes. What?
It matters, where are you raising money? If you are raising money in New England, then go talk to some people that have raised money in New England and find out what the culture is around what sort of terms are acceptable. And it's going to be different in New York or in Boulder or in Tel Aviv than it is in Silicon Valley. So figure out what those norms are. Don't just assume that everyone knows safe notes are great. They are for certain markets. And in other markets, in New England, probably 2/3 of all angels that I know will categorically not even look at your deck if they find out it's a safe note. You're just dead on arrival. If you're a convertible note, your odds are way better. It's probably 1/3 to half of them will just automatically decline you without talking to you or reading your deck if they find out it's a convertible note. Wow, that's a powerful cultural norm. So A, find out what the cultural norms are for terms in your area and then go accordingly. Now, if I were to guess, why does New England not like them? Well, again, we mentioned we're a lot more conservative. We have a lot more investors doing the early exit. So if you're really focused on an early exit and there's only going to be 1 or 2 rounds of funding, then getting those terms exactly right is really important. And if you're in Silicon Valley, like there's going to be F rounds of venture capital, A, B, C, D, E, F, plus post-seed, seed, pre-seed, seed 2, all that other crap that they come up with, right? If there's that many rounds, it kind of doesn't matter too much what your first terms are, because the C round investor is going to say, I don't care what deal you gave those people. The golden rule, I have the gold, I make the rules. So if you want my money, these are the terms. But with us, we got to get it right at the beginning, or we're probably screwing ourselves and or the entrepreneur. And that means we're hyper conscious of overly high or overly low valuations, right? If the entrepreneur takes too low, which isn't a very common occurrence, but I've seen it happen, I tell the entrepreneur, look, you're going to dilute yourself too much. I'm not going to wake up every Monday and make sure this company succeeds. You are. But if you're down to 3% ownership of the company and it's not a unicorn, then someday you're going to quit and then I'll be screwed. So in my enlightened self-interest, I want you to have a big chunk of your own company.
I hear founders all the time talking about dilution, not diluting themselves too much. On one side, it's true. You want to retain control of your company. On the other hand, do you want to own 10% of a $100 billion company or 100% of a $1 million company? If you are unsure about what you want to tackle, or if you want to gain a competitive advantage, you should look into Skillshare. I watched Marques Brownlee's course for YouTube creators the other day, and it was fantastic. We would have saved so much time and money if we had watched this earlier on. In our defense, it's a really new course. He published it a few months back. But you can sign up for Skillshare for free using the link in the description. The first 1,000 people to click it will get a completely free trial on their premium membership. Thanks a lot for watching. Make sure you do the clicking and the commenting and the liking, and we'll see you next week.